Getting pulled over by a police officer can be stressful, nerve-wracking, and let's be honest, nobody enjoys it. Your heart starts racing, your palms get sweaty, and sometimes your mouth starts moving before your brain catches up. That last part, that's where people get into real trouble. As an attorney who has represented countless clients in traffic court, I've heard every possible thing someone could say during a traffic stop. And believe me, some responses are absolute disasters waiting to happen. Today, I'm going to walk you through 20 things you should absolutely never say to a traffic cop if you want to avoid making your situation exponentially worse. Some of these might seem obvious, but you'd be surprised how often people say them in the heat of the moment. Others might actually seem helpful, but they can come back to haunt you in court. So buckle up, because this could save you hundreds or even thousands of dollars and possibly keep you out of jail. Let's start with number 1, and this is perhaps the most common mistake people make. Never say, "I wasn't speeding," or any variation of denying what the officer observed. Here's why this is terrible. When you make a definitive statement like that, you're essentially testifying against yourself. If the officer has you on radar going 70 in a 55 and you insist you were only going 55, you've now created a credibility problem for yourself. More importantly, you've made a statement that can be used against you in court. The officer will note in their report that you denied speeding, which makes you look dishonest when the evidence proves otherwise. Instead, simply remain silent or ask why you were pulled over without making any statements about your speed. Number 2, never say, "I only had 2 drinks," or mention alcohol consumption at all. This is absolutely critical. The moment you admit to consuming any alcohol, you've given the officer probable cause to investigate further for driving under the influence. It doesn't matter if you say, "I only had 1 beer 3 hours ago." All the officer hears is that you've been drinking and you're operating a vehicle. This will lead to field sobriety tests and possibly a breathalyzer or blood test. Even if you're under the legal limit, you've now complicated your situation tremendously and given law enforcement ammunition to use against you. Number 3, and this one surprises people, never say, "I didn't see the sign," or "I didn't know the speed limit." Why? Because ignorance of the law is not a defense. When you say this, you're essentially admitting guilt while trying to excuse it. You're confirming that yes, you were breaking the law, you just didn't realize it. That's not going to help you in any way. In fact, it shows a lack of attention to your surroundings, which could make things worse. Officers and judges expect drivers to be aware of posted signs and speed limits. Number 4, never say, "Do you know who I am?" or mention any connections you have. This is one of the fastest ways to turn a warning into a ticket or a ticket into an arrest. Officers deal with entitled attitudes every single day, and nothing will make them less sympathetic to your situation than implying you're above the law. Whether you know the mayor, the chief of police, or the governor, keep it to yourself. Even if you think you have connections that could help you, using them at the scene almost always backfires spectacularly. Number 5, don't say, "I pay your salary," or anything about taxes. Yes, technically public servants are paid through tax revenue, but reminding an officer of this during a traffic stop is incredibly disrespectful and will absolutely not work in your favor. It's confrontational, it's rude, and it will turn what might have been a warning into the maximum penalty allowed by law. Officers are doing their job, and antagonizing them is never a smart strategy. Number 6, never volunteer where you're coming from or where you're going unless directly asked, and even then, keep it vague. Why does this matter? Because your answer can provide probable cause for further investigation. If you say you're coming from a bar, a party, or even a friend's house in a certain neighborhood, you might be giving the officer a reason to suspect other illegal activity. Keep your responses minimal and don't offer additional information that wasn't requested. Number 7, never say, "I know my rights," in an aggressive or confrontational manner. Yes, you absolutely should know your rights, but the way you assert them matters tremendously. When you say this phrase in an antagonistic tone, officers often interpret it as you being difficult, and it can escalate the situation. Instead, if you need to assert your rights, do so calmly and respectfully. For example, "I'd prefer not to answer that question," or "I don't consent to a search," are much more effective ways to protect yourself legally without creating conflict. Number 8, don't say, "Why aren't you out catching real criminals?" This is insulting to the officer and completely unhelpful to your situation. Traffic enforcement is part of their job, and traffic violations can be extremely dangerous. Speeding, reckless driving, and DUIs kill thousands of people every year. Suggesting that traffic enforcement isn't real police work will only anger the officer and guarantee you get the maximum penalty. Number 9, never say, "I was just keeping up with traffic," or "everyone else was going the same speed." This is not a legal defense. If everyone jumped off a bridge, would you? That's essentially what the officer is going to think. You're still responsible for following the law regardless of what others around you are doing. Plus, you're admitting that you were, in fact, breaking the law. You're just trying to justify it, which doesn't help your case at all. Number 10, don't say, "This is harassment," or accuse the officer of profiling without legitimate cause. Making accusations of discrimination or harassment without basis will immediately put the officer on the defensive and escalate the situation. If you genuinely believe you've been profiled or harassed, that's something to address through proper channels with evidence and documentation, not at the side of the road. However, false accusations will destroy any goodwill and could potentially lead to additional charges. Number 11, never say, "I didn't do anything wrong" as a blanket statement. Again, you're testifying. If the officer has evidence that you committed a violation, saying you did nothing wrong makes you look dishonest or unaware. It's better to remain silent than to make false statements that can be used against you later. Remember, anything you say can and will be used against you in court. Number 12, don't ask, "Can I just pay the fine now?" or offer to settle it on the spot. In some jurisdictions, this could be interpreted as attempted bribery, which is a serious criminal offense. Even if you're not trying to bribe anyone and you're just trying to be convenient, it can be misunderstood. Never offer money or suggest paying a fine at the scene. Let the proper legal process work as it's designed to. 13, never say, "My friend is a lawyer and said," unless they are actually representing you. Officers hear this all the time, and it usually shows you misunderstand the law. 14, don't say, "I'm in a hurry." Being late isn't a legal excuse, and admitting it implies reckless driving. Speed limits exist for everyone. 15, avoid, "I was barely speeding." Any amount over the limit is a violation. Admitting it just makes the officer's job easier. 16. Don't challenge the radar gun. Unless you have expert evidence, arguing roadside looks argumentative and won't help. Your lawyer can contest it in court. 17. Saying, "I'm a good driver," or citing your record is irrelevant. Even careful drivers break laws. Save this info for court. 18. Don't complain, "This isn't fair." Officers enforce the law, they don't make it. Save debates for legislators, not the roadside. 19. Avoid, "Are you going to give me a ticket?" It can backfire, making you seem entitled or more concerned about the penalty than safety. 20. Saying, "I'm recording this," aggressively creates conflict. You have the right to record, but do so calmly and respectfully. What to do instead? Keep it polite and minimal. Provide license, registration, and insurance. For questions about your actions, say, "I'd like to speak with an attorney." Keep hands visible, follow instructions, stay calm, and don't argue. The roadside isn't a courtroom. Anything you say can hurt your case. Save your defense for court with proper evidence and legal help. Traffic violations can carry fines, points, higher insurance, suspensions, or even jail. Don't worsen it with careless words. This is general legal info, not personal advice. For serious charges, consult a qualified attorney. Drive safely and follow the laws to avoid stops altogether.